Testing 1, 2. This is the first tape like this. I'll show you. This is the first tape. Let it run. Testing 1, 2. Erik Conn here. Today we are going to be talking about something that I've learned about since getting into this videography game. Erik Conn here. This is the first tape. Peace everybody, today is December 4th, 2022. Today we're going to be talking about the triangle exposure.
Essentially a triangle, Earth, suborbit, Earth.
Something I feel all photographers and videographers should know once they start getting into the game. And let's be clear, this is for beginners.
Some people do get better.
Full-time filmmaker, I'm a student of Parker Warbeck, Jake Weisler, Landon. Even though those guys is doing their own things, they're still a part of full-time filmmakers. I'm taking different lighting courses, different courses on cinematography, courses on writing, courses on everything, just like yourself.
Soldiers, just like yourself.
But the reason I said I wanted to do the triangle exposure first, because I feel like it is one of the most important 3 pieces, 3 steps every, like I said, beginner photographer, cinematographer, videographer should know. ISO actually stands for International Organization for Standardization. It's basically your camera sensitivity to light. So ISO is one of the main components, or the main component, where you let your light into the camera when you start going in darker places. I'll give you a sample right here where we start out with the ISO. Most cameras, some cameras start with 50, but most start with 100. The ISO at 100.
100 performances. Why?
Your base ISO is 100, 200, 400. The ISO is at 400, 800. The ISO is at 800, which we can see is blown out.
Really blown out.
Once we start going up to, so let me give you an example. Your ISO lets light into the camera, but the more light you start letting into the camera, you can start getting what they call noise.
It's not noise, it's a perfect harmony.
So your ISO is something you have to be careful about. Your standard ISO, if you're in the house, you're probably going to have your ISO at maybe 400 to 800. If you're outside, you're going to probably have your ISO at 100 to 200. So your ISO is going to go all the way up to, 25,600.
Higher than that.
Once you start getting in like about 3,200, 6,400, that's when it's going to start breaking up a little bit. I'm going to show you an example right here of a bridge where on the left side you see it's ISO 100, ISO 800, ISO 1600, and ISO 3200. You can see at 800 it starts to break up, 1600 it breaks up more, and 3200 it breaks up even more. Definitely not a good image. They do have software one I use called Neat Video that actually helps with the grain. The only thing about it to me is it makes the picture softer.
I'll make his head softer than his arse.
So to me, you kind of got to worry about that if you go too deep and trying to knock the grain off. The best thing to do is understand the triangle exposure and try to get your exposure correct right out the gate. Your ISO, your shutter, and aperture, your f-stop, basically is all going to work hand in hand.
Hand in hand with a friend.
And letting light into the camera. All 3 things let light into the camera, but all 3 things are used for different things. If you look at this Empire State Building right here, on the left side we have ISO 100. It is at night, as you can see. On the right side we have 3200. That's a noisy image. You're going up and down with it. If you your camera also has settings inside, so I'll give you some scenarios where if you're outside, daylight, you want your ISO at 100 to 200. If you're indoors and you're using a flash, you could go 400 to 800. Indoors at night, 16 to 3200. Shade indoors, 200 to 400. Your camera's going to have settings to where it could give you a little sample of where you should be and what your color temperature should be. That's something you definitely should start learning too. Also, color temperature, we'll probably talk about that in the next video. So, once again, we're talking about the triangle exposure. We spoke about ISO, now we're going to talk about aperture.
Well, let's get to it then.
Aperture is basically your f-stop.
What's the F stand for, Fritz? France.
Your f-stop is your shutter actually opening and closing.
With all due respect, I don't think I would call the sound of doors opening and closing art.
That's how the light gets in.
So some apertures start at 1.4. That's really a wide open, all the way up to f22. That's actually closed all the way. So what happens is at f22, say for instance you got 6 blades. What's going to happen is it's going to close. So I'll give you an example. The room behind me, if that room was dark.
This is a dangerous time for you, when you will be tempted by the dark side of the Force.
And I had my f-stop at f22, which is basically me kind of like closing my eye all the way. So if I close my eye all the way, that's like my shutter being closed. If I end up opening my eye, now I'm opening my eye and I'm coming from f22 all the way up to f1.8 or even 1.4. So now my eye is wide open. I can see everything. That's basically what your aperture is. Your aperture is your shutter opening and closing.
No, it does stop.
I told him, Lou! I've been telling him every day for a week!
To let more light in. Now, it's not about just letting light in for the shutter. It talks about depth of field.
You have an infinite depth of field into environments that exist completely in two-dimensional space.
And we're talking about, you know, in focus and out of focus. So what happens is when you open your f-stop all the way, say for instance we got a 1.4 or 1.8. If I was to put a subject in front of me and have a little bit of background where I got some depth, everything in the background is going to be blurred out, which is called, we call it bokeh. It's going to be nice and blurred out. If you got lights back there, they're going to be all blurry and like, you know, it looks beautiful. You can't really see, nothing will be in focus. Everything will be out of focus. It'll be looking beautiful because it will be called what they call bokeh. If I end up opening my aperture to f16, everything's going to be in focus. So if I have, say for instance, I'll give you an example. I did a wedding, I had the bride in the front and I had the groom in the back.
Did you put a camera in the back?
I had the groom a little further back, maybe 6 feet. I had the groom, I had the Sigma 1.8 on her. I had to focus on her and I had him in the background and he was blurry. And then what I did was I took the focus and I did a pull. I put the focus on him and she was blurry.
The girl, where is she?
Well, where is she?
Now, if I was to have that aperture at maybe 4 or 5.6 or 8, I probably might get a little bit of bokeh in the background, but he's not going to be out of focus as much as if it was a 1.4 or 1.8.
Where is he?
Where is he?
F-stops go from, like I said, 1.4. My camera that I'm using here, I've got a 2-camera setup right now. That camera right here that I'm pointing to is the EOS R with the Sigma 18 to 35 1.8. We got the Ninja 5 on there. We got our ISO at, I think it's 800 on this one, 1600 on this one. This one here is the EOS R6 with the Ninja 5 with the Sigma 18 to 35 1.8. We got the Rode mics on both of them. Unfortunately, I didn't bring my Saramonic mics. I left them home charging.
You left it down at Greeley's.
You left it in the room.
So I'm actually going off my Rode mics, which I would rather had use my Saramonic mics. So, but it's all good. So once again, the aperture starts at, you know, most of them, you could go to 1.2, but most 1.2s that I find, you have to go manually. Most 1.2s are not like autofocus lenses. So you probably got to shoot manually when it comes to anything under 1.4. I've never had a 1.4, can't wait to get one, but my 1.8 is definitely awesome. So like I said, once again, at 1.4, everything's going to be, the background, everything's going to be milky bokeh. At f22, f24, everything's going to be in focus. So that is your f-stop broken down. Any questions, hit me up. Next, we're going to talk about shutter speed.
Why is this taking so long?
We talked about f-stop, aperture. Now we're going to talk about the shutter speed.
Then here's the shutter.
The shutter is basically, it is the shutter. The f-stop and shutter is basically the aperture is using your shutter. But the shutter is what's opening and closing at a fast rate. It's like your eye blinking. That's why I want to say, you could kind of, if your eye blinks, it's like your shutter. So if I blink my eye 24 times in 1 second, that means I just produced 24 frames per second. That's what your shutter is. Your shutter is opening and closing as you take a picture or as you're filming. If you're doing 60 frames, your shutter is opening and closing at 60 frames per second. And this is very important because your shutter is going to determine the darkness.
Even darkness must pass. We must wait for cover of darkness.
Actually also bringing in light and darkness, but your shutter's basically, your shutter's really to capture either blurriness or sharpness. So I'll give you an example. If you put your shutter all the way down, at the sample right here, you'll see all the way to the right 1/4 of a second, then you see after it 1/8 of a second, then you go all the way to the left, you see 1/1000th of a second. That is your shutter opening and closing very, very fast or very, very slow. You're either going to get a darker image or a brighter image, depending on which way you go. When you bring your shutter all the way open, like to 1/4 of a second, you're getting brighter images and you're getting way more motion blur. So your shutter's really to deal with sharpness and blur. And how many times your shutter opens and closes.
Only the dark one opens and closes the door to Silent Hill.
One of the rules of thumbs is when you shoot at 24 frames per second, you have your shutter at 50 frames. I mean at 50, 1/50. If you shoot at 60, you have your shutter at 120. If you shoot at 120, you have your shutter at 240. Now the thing about that is you can have your shutter at 240 and you can even go up at 120. It's your preference. You could go up past 240. It's not going to bother everything, because you're probably going to more than likely slow that 120 down.
Can you please slow down?
But you really want to mess with your shutter to get the look that you're looking for. But once you hit 120, you could go past 240. That won't even be an issue. So once again, if you look at this chart right here, you see 1/1000. That's for sports. Anytime you're doing sports, you want to do 1/1000th of a second, 1/2500th of a second, because now the person's moving fast.
It's moving fast.
And it's moving fast.
And your camera's going to capture that picture very, very sharp. Now, if you move all the way to the right, sometimes people like to go into the highway or get some what they call light trails. I'll give you this example of a light trail right here. This is a light trail right here. So once you go to the highway and you put your camera on a tripod and put that shutter, that shutter all the way down to maybe 1/4 of a second, 1/8 of a second. And what's going to happen is when you take the picture, it's going to take a long time. Like it's not going to be click. It's going to be like you're going to push that button and it might take 10 seconds.
Stand by 10 seconds. 10 seconds to commercial.
To actually click and go through. Because what's happening is it's actually taking the picture and the shutter staying open. And then it's going to close. And then you're going to get those nice light trails. Also, if you go to a waterfall, I'll show you a sample right here. If you look on the left side, that's at a fast shutter speed. And then if you look on the right side where the water looks milky, that's slow shutter speed. So shutter speed is very important to make sure you get the look that you're looking for. Here's another sample. Left side, 1/200th of a second. Then at the right, 1/3 of a second. So your shutter speed is like an eyeball opening and closing. So your ISO, your shutter, and your aperture all go hand in hand. That's it on the triangle exposure.
No, okay, that's it for the day then.
My name is Erik Conn, eShootsVideos.com. If anybody feels that we said something wrong, please leave a little comment. We have no problem. We ain't dealing with egos.
It's ego stroking.
Just trying to get some help, and we are just trying to share what we've learned in the last 2 years with our new crew that's going to be watching us and following us. I hope you enjoy. Peace and love. Ooh, I finally got that shit done.